Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into one of the most explosive topics out there, the high-stakes collision of artificial intelligence, human creativity, and the centuries-old rules of copyright law.
So let's just get right to the big question, the one that's on everybody's mind. Is generative AI this incredible new tool for artists, or is it just a high-tech thief, plain and simple? This is the debate that is absolutely tearing the creative world apart right now.
Now, if you've been following this at all, you've probably heard this phrase a million times. You can't copyright style. It's thrown around like it's the final word, a simple answer to a really messy problem. But what if that simple answer is dangerously wrong?
That's exactly what we're going to unpack. Let's start by really digging into this popular slogan and figuring out what the law actually has to say about it.
Well, it turns out legal experts are saying this slogan is, at best, totally meaningless, and more likely, it's just wrong. See, the law is way more nuanced than that. You can't copyright a single brushstroke, sure, or one color choice, but a whole constellation of unique choices that come together to form a distinct style, that's a different story. That can be protected.
And this brings us to a huge myth about how AI even works. A lot of people picture it as a kind of collage machine, just digitally cutting and pasting bits and pieces from other people's images. But that's not really it. It's a learning system. It looks at millions of images to understand concepts, like what makes a dress, or what punk-inspired looks like. Then it uses those learned patterns to generate something totally new.
You know, to really get our heads around this, let's step away from AI for a second and look at an industry that's been wrestling with these ideas for centuries: high fashion.
In the world of fashion, borrowing, or as they like to call it, inspiration, isn't just common. It's basically how the whole game is played. Designers are constantly looking back at historical art, digging through archives, and looking at what each other are doing to create the next big thing.
They even have a name for it: flocking. That's when you suddenly see like dozens of designers all using the same spiral silhouette or the same color palette in one season. It's not because they're all in a room copying each other, it's because they're all swimming in the same cultural ocean, being influenced by the same trends.
Just think about Christian Dior's iconic little black dress. Now that design was inspired by the corseted silhouettes that came before it, but Dior put his own modern spin on it. And ever since, that one design has become this foundational piece, a creative wellspring for literally thousands of other designers.
Okay, so with all that history in mind, let's bring AI back into the studio. How is this brand new technology fitting into that ancient cycle of creativity?
Well, it's already here. This isn't some sci-fi future. Big brands like Kalina Strada are already using AI as a design tool. For their spring/summer 2024 collection, they used AI to help come up with new prints and brainstorm different silhouettes. It's already part of the high fashion workflow.
So how does that actually work? It's not like they just press a button and a finished dress pops out. First, a human designer, with all their expertise, writes a really detailed prompt. Then, the AI generates a bunch of visual ideas. But here's the most important part. The human designer then steps in to select, tweak, modify, and add their own personal touch to make the final piece.
The best way to think about it is like a super-powered sketchbook. A designer can take that same classic Dior dress, feed it into an AI, and in seconds get dozens of new interpretations to spark their own ideas. The tech doesn't replace their creativity, it just gives it a massive boost.
Okay, so if the process is this dance between a human and a machine, how on earth do the courts decide if something is original enough to get a copyright? Well, that brings us to the all-important legal test for originality. In places like the EU and the UK, the big test is whether a work is the author's own intellectual creation. That's a fancy way of saying, does this work reflect the author's free and creative choices? Does it have the stamp of their personality on it? Now, I know that can sound a little abstract, so let's look at a real-world example. Take these buckle ballerina shoes from the brand Ganni. A court in Denmark recently decided that this specific design was original and deserved to be protected by copyright. So why?
So here's the key thing. It wasn't because the shoe was some totally new invention. I mean, ballerina flats have been around forever. So have buckles. The originality was in the specific combination of those things. The designer made a free and creative choice to smash together the delicate, feminine vibe of a ballet flat with these hard, almost punk rock buckles. That contrast, that specific fusion, that was their unique vision.
But, and this is a big but,
What happens when the AI gets a little too good at mimicking the stuff it was trained on? This brings us to a very real risk when we talk about AI and art: the risk of copyright infringement. There's a technical term for this. It's called overfitting. It's basically when an AI model studies its training data so hard that it stops learning general concepts and just starts memorizing the answers. And when that happens, the risk that it's going to spit out something that looks way too similar to an existing copyrighted work goes way, way. And you can actually see it happening right here. These two images of a red dress were made using the exact same prompt. Just look at the similarities: that heart-shaped neckline, the way the fabric drapes at the waist, that high slit. The AI model seems to have overfit on a very specific type of red dress it was trained on, and now it keeps generating outputs that are just a little too close for comfort.
So how do we navigate this? If the tool itself can sometimes mess up and create something that infringes on copyright, where does the responsibility, and more importantly, the authorship, actually lie?
And this is maybe the most important legal point of this whole thing. The law isn't trying to figure out if the AI can be an author. It doesn't care about that. It asks a much simpler question. Where's the human? Where can we point to the designer's free and creative choices in this process?
At the end of the day, the value, the originality, and the legality of a design made with AI all comes down to the human touch. It's in the careful way the prompt is written, in the selection of one output from hundreds of possibilities, and in the final changes a designer makes. A human can take a generic, maybe even infringing AI image and transform it into something new and non-infringing that reflects their personal vision.
So all of this leaves us with one last big question to chew on. We've gone from paintbrushes to cameras to design software and now to generative AI. At every single step, our tools have gotten smarter. The real question for our future isn't whether the tool can create, but what it means for a human to be the artist.